Hello everyone, welcome back to Vedic Enigma. So I hope that all of you are doing great. And in today's video, we will be talking about a very interesting topic that is on when will you meet your future spouse. So I was looking at the marriage playlist and I saw that, many videos were made on marriage, on relationships, but this one was, missing. So I thought of making a video on this topic. And when we talk about, when will we meet our future spouse, like we know that in the Kundli, the first house, which is the Lagna, is very important because it represents you, your body and your physical existence, basically. And just opposite to the first house is the seventh house, which is the house of your spouse, which is the house of marriage. So you can see that both of these houses are completely opposite of each other. And anytime, you get married, both of these houses need to be activated in some way. They have to be connected in some way. And even when you're meeting your future spouse, the seventh house has to interact with the first house. Similarly, the first house has to interact with the seventh house. So that is on a very basic level. And without this, even logically, if you think, no marriage can ever happen, because you have to meet the person physically. And similarly, we see that the lords of these two houses become extremely important. So, for example, if you are a Virgo Lagna, in the main chart, so opposite of Virgo, we have the sign of Pisces. And Virgo, as we know, is ruled by Mercury. So Mercury and Jupiter, which is the planet that rules Pisces, both of these planets have to somehow come together, in the transit, which is also known as gochar, and then only you can say that okay, you have met the spouse and some kind of a union has happened, and after which you would get married to the person. So that is a very basic way of looking at it, and I'll talk about all the 12 ascendants also, that what are the different combinations that can that you have to see basically in the transit, that you can tell that okay, this might be the person for you. But you will also see that this is not a completely foolproof method, because a lot of times this transit will repeat, you know. So it's not that every time you will get married or every time you are meeting the person. It can also show that maybe you did meet somebody, but they were not your future spouse, but you had maybe like a relationship with them. So in that case, also you will observe that this kind of a combination will work. You will see, because seventh house also represents other people in general, people who are coming basically in your life. And generally also, like, you will notice when, especially a planet like Jupiter, when it transits through your seventh house, you can meet a lot of people in that 1 year. A lot of marriage proposals can come, a lot of people can come in your life, but every person will not be your spouse. So how will you differentiate? That is a bit tricky part. So this is just, I would say, this is one technique that you can have a look at it on a very cursory level. So I will also be talking about two, three other techniques which you can make use of to kind of narrow down your prediction. And one of the techniques, which is there is from Bhrigu. So it is not from Parashara. Like in Parashara, we look at the first house, we look at the Lagna, the seventh house. But in Bhrigu, there is no concept of the Lagna as such. So Bhrigu primarily works, along with planets and with the combination of planets. And like we know in Bhrigu, Mars is the planet which represents husband in for a female. Like in Parashara, we say that it is Jupiter. And I know in the comments, a lot of people will, maybe argue over this, that whether it is Jupiter or whether it is Mars. So I have made it clear before also, because if you're following Parashara, you have to look at Jupiter. Jupiter is your husband. And if you're following a Bhrigu, you will say Mars is your husband, So that is like the basic differentiator between the two. So you have to look at Mars, and for example, you have to see that in which sign Mars is placed in your chart as a female. And when Jupiter as a planet, or maybe Saturn as a planet, Saturn can also show that. It's not that only Jupiter will give something like that, because in Bhrigu, both Jupiter as well as Saturn are very important planets to give any kind of event like marriage. And before that, you will obviously meet the person. So when Jupiter is transiting over your natal Mars, for example, if you have Mars situated in the sign of Gemini, so right now we know that Jupiter is transiting the sign of Gemini. Or if suppose Jupiter is transiting trines to that particular sign, like trines or opposite to it. Like for example, if you have Mars in the sign of Gemini, so trines would be Libra, Libra ka sign, and Aquarius. and opposite of Gemini would be Sagittarius. So anytime, like if a girl has her Mars in the sign of Gemini and Jupiter is transiting Gemini, Sagittarius, Aquarius, or Libra, then there are very high chances that during that 1 year you can meet your potential future spouse, And a lot of times you will see that marriages can also happen during that, 1 year when Jupiter is transiting over your natal Mars. Not necessarily always, but in a lot of cases you will see that, some roka can happen, some engagement can happen, or like marriage related kind of an event can happen. And Saturn similarly can also indicate something like that. So when Saturn would here, definitely indicate a late marriage, in that sense that if Saturn is really making you meet your spouse, so it is happening late in life. But suppose you have your Mars placed in the sign of Taurus, and you have the Saturn transit happening in the sign of Taurus, or in the sign of, Scorpio, which is opposite of Taurus, or in Virgo or Capricorn. So basically, you have to look at the trines 159, and you also have to look at the house opposite to it. So anytime Jupiter or Saturn, as a planet transits these particular four signs, basically, so you can say that during that time you can, meet the potential future spouse. So this is another way of, looking at it. And the third way you can look also, with the help of Venus and Mars, because in Bhrigu, Venus is the female, feminine energy, Mars is the masculine, husband energy, And for a female, like Venus is also represents you. So anytime, like in the transit of Mars, like you find that, suppose you have your Venus placed in the sign of Aries, okay, and Mars is transiting the sign of Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius, or Libra. So again, like those four signs which are, in trine to the placement of Venus in your chart and opposite of that. So that can also, that 1 month or like, 2 months can also indicate that you can meet that person during that time. Similarly, you can also have a look at your Mars, and you can see the Venus transit over it. So suppose you have Mars like placed in the sign of Capricorn, let's say, and you have Venus transiting over Capricorn, in that 1 month, or you have Venus transiting in the sign of Taurus or Virgo or Cancer. So all of these positions become very strong, to make you meet some other person. Because it is basically like, masculine and feminine coming together. That is the Venus Mars thing. So this is from Bhrigu, how you can look at it. And another way you can look, which, sometimes you will see that works, is the chart which is known as Tithi Pravesh chart. So I've already made a video on this. You can check that video out also. So it was made, I think, long time back. And so this is again a Parashara concept of Tithi Pravesh chart, but it is like again a yearly kind of a chart, in which you can see that if in that Tithi Pravesh chart for that year, you find that your Lagna Lord and your seventh Lord are getting combined, connected in any way, or they are 1/7 to each other, in that particular chart. So in that year also you can meet that, you can meet your future spouse, So that is another way by which you can have a look at it. And I will also come to certain doubts that people might have, which is in the case of Scorpio sign and Aquarius sign, because Scorpio and Aquarius can also be your, first lord, or like it can fall in the seventh house, So what planet do you consider for that? Is it Mars? You have to look at Ketu. So you can see that Scorpio is primarily ruled by Mars, but it is also co-ruled by Ketu. So if in your chart you find that Ketu is gaining more strength, in the sense that it is conjunct more number of planets, it is strong sign-wise, like it is placed in Cancer, Scorpio, or Pisces, so it performs well in water signs. So you can then look at Ketu more prominently. You have to look at the Ketu connection getting formed with, your first lord or your seventh lord. So, for example, just to simplify it, like if you are a Taurus ascendant, so Taurus, as you know, is ruled by Venus, okay, and you have opposite of that, which is the sign of Scorpio. But if you find in your chart that Ketu is stronger, like compared to Mars, then you have to look at Venus Ketu combination when it will happen in the transit, So something like that can actually give you can help you to meet this person. But if you find that Mars is becoming more prominent, in the chart compared to Ketu, then you have to look at Venus-Mars combination in the transit, so that is how you have to see it. Similarly, if you have Aquarius sign, coming in the first house or the seventh house. So as we know, Aquarius is also has two rulers in the sense Saturn and Rahu. So similarly, like if you find that Rahu is much more stronger, powerful in your chart compared to Saturn. So in the sense that Rahu is in earthy signs, like 2, 6, 10, airy signs like 3, 7, 11, or it is conjunct Venus, Mercury. It has like large number of combination of planets getting connected to it. Its dispositor is very strong. So if you find overall that Rahu is actually much more stronger than Saturn, then you have to look at Rahu's connection with the other, planet. For example, if you are a Leo ascendant, then you will see Rahu Sun combination, in the sense that when it will happen in the transit. So these are the kind of combinations, which can actually trigger meeting of the spouse. I will also be talking about each ascendant now, that what are the different combinations that can trigger, meeting the spouse. And of course, transits are the key to this because, you are physically meeting the person, and even like to time the month and all, like transits are definitely very, very important. And Tithi Pravesh chart is something which is not exactly a transit kind of a thing, but the other techniques that I have talked about, they are all transit based. So let's talk about Aries ascendant now. So suppose you are an Aries ascendant, and you can see that 1 number is in the first house and 7 number is in the seventh house. So the two most important planets for you are Venus and Mars. So anytime Venus and Mars are actually conjunct together, in the transit. So you can look at those months when Venus and Mars will be conjunct. Then that time is a very strong time that you can meet the spouse. I will also add another layer to this, that you also can look at the house in which it is transiting. Suppose it is transiting in the sign of Virgo. Okay, let's say you are an Aries ascendant and Venus Mars is in Virgo in the transit. So you can see that Virgo is the sixth house. They're definitely not the ideal time, not the best time, even though the transit is happening, but it is not really indicating a very strong thing which will culminate to a marriage. So you also have to pay attention to the house in which this transit is happening. If it is happening, suppose in the Lagna, okay, like Venus, Mars, and Aries, transit wise, it's a very strong, powerful transit to give that. And if suppose by chance Jupiter is also blessing this, transit wise, like Jupiter is in Libra at that time, suppose, or it's in Leo, it's a very, very powerful period. Like, in that period, you can definitely say with a lot of certainty that the person, might be, it would culminate into something long term because we are looking at marriage over here. That's why. Similarly, if it is transiting through a bad house, like the eighth house, okay, eighth house is also a good house, but like in terms of marriage, it is an uncertain house, because it is again, it can show that okay, you might meet somebody, but the relationship itself will be very uncertain. Anything can happen. Similarly, the 12th house. So these are the three like houses, most obvious houses to avoid. But if it's suppose happening, through your kendras, it is happening through the trine houses. These are good houses generally, So house also matters. And another thing I will point here along with the houses is that the influence of malefic planets. Like for an Aries ascendant, you also have to see, and you can also take this reading for somebody who is a Libra ascendant. Okay, because Libra, Aries, for both of them, like Venus Mars combination is only working. So if you suppose find that Venus Mars are conjunct, like it is happening in the sky, like that transit is happening, but Ketu is also joined, with it. So again, now that is an obstruction, like it is not a very smooth kind of a thing. So you also have to look at other malefic planets like Saturn, Ketu, Rahu, what role they are playing in the transit, how position wise they are placed from this transit happening. Are they obstructing it? Are they supporting it? If like, suppose I gave you the example of Jupiter, that is supporting it, it is blessing it. So these things also have to matter. And that is why these are the finer nuances that, sometimes people miss out on. It is not just always that, oh, for Libra and for Aries ascendant, Venus and Mars have come together in the transit, and then, this person comes and they are the one for me. It is not like that, So these are the things that you have to look at overall. Now let's talk about the next ascendant, which is Taurus ascendant. So suppose you are a Taurus ascendant or you are a Scorpio ascendant, so in both the cases, you will find that, 1, 7 houses are ruled by Venus and Mars, and also Ketu can, come in those cases where, in your chart, Ketu is stronger than Mars. So again, you have to look at Venus and Mars transit happening in the sky. And for this also, I would say that you can again watch the Aries part, which I just mentioned, because for Aries, for Taurus, basically, for Libra, and so for Aries, Taurus, Libra, and Scorpio, for all 4 of them, you might be having any of these ascendants. The planets are basically the same, Venus and Mars, you have to see that. And the only thing that will change is Ketu, so you have to specifically look at Ketu differently. Now let's talk about different planets. So let's talk about the sign of Gemini. Okay, so if you are a Gemini ascendant, if you are a Sagittarius ascendant, if you are a Virgo ascendant, and if you are a Pisces ascendant. So I have taken all 4 together because the planets are basically the same, like if you are a Gemini ascendant, you have to look at Jupiter and Mercury. If you are a Sagittarius ascendant, then also you will look at Jupiter and Mercury. Same for Virgo, also you will look at Jupiter and Mercury. So now here for Pisces, you have to, again see that some people also consider Ketu, ruling the sign of Pisces, though not very strongly, but like in certain rare cases, you can see that also. But mainly it is Jupiter ruling for Pisces also. So anytime for all these 4 ascendants, anytime Jupiter and Mercury are conjunct together in the transit, that is a very strong period to indicate that you can meet your future spouse during that period. Okay, so it can be like, suppose Jupiter and Mercury have come together, in the sign of, let's say, Sagittarius, or it's happening in Pisces, or it is happening in Virgo. Very, very strong periods, So again, over here, one thing you have to take into account is that it is not just these 2 planets coming together. You also have to see that in which house this transit is happening, because let's say this transit is happening in the 7th house, like for a Virgo ascendant, it is happening in Pisces. It's a very, very, very strong transit, But suppose this same transit of Jupiter and Mercury coming together, it is happening in Aquarius for a Virgo ascendant. Not the best period, right? Because, you can see that the 7th Lord has gone to the 6th house, the Lagna Lord has gone to the 6th house. So what will you expect out of this? Even if you're meeting somebody, what will come out of it? So this is something which you have to pay attention to the house as well. Certain houses will be much more prominent, much more stronger to give that result. And along with the houses, it can also matter that which planets are placed in those houses, like over which planets these planets are actually going. Like suppose you already have Ketu placed in the 7th house for a Virgo ascendant, let's say. And then on top of that, Jupiter, Mercury are coming together. Or in the transit, you find that Ketu has come in the sign of Pisces along with Jupiter and Mercury. Then Ketu can here obstruct, the results, or it can give some challenges, obstacles in the meeting. Similarly, you can see that Saturn, Mars, Rahu, all of these malefic planets, what role they are playing in the transit, are they obstructing this combination, or they are like, not obstructing it, or, it is kind of like a blessing of some other benefic planets that is coming on top of it. Maybe a planet like Venus, for example, for a Virgo ascendant. So these are again the finer nuances that you have to look at. And a lot of times people, sometimes don't pay attention to these things, that it is not just the gochar which is happening, but you also have to look at the placement position of other planets. And again, like, if you find that this transit is happening through the 1st house only, or through the 7th house, or like, let's say the 5th house, the 9th house, then, and even out of these 4 houses, 1st and 7th would be the strongest, to give the maximum result. Because you can see that, like, let's imagine that you are a Sagittarius ascendant, and right now, like, you have Jupiter transiting through your seventh house. So Lagna Lord has come to the seventh house. That itself is a very strong, transit to meet the future spouse. Or in some cases, the seventh Lord would come to the Lagna, like if you imagine for a Virgo ascendant, like if Jupiter, when it goes in the sign of Virgo, seventh Lord would come in the Lagna, so these transits themselves become very prominent to show something like that. So that is something which you have to see, that the house also matters, and the other planets, placement of other planets, are they obstructing it, or are they supporting it, also matter. Now let's talk about the next ascendants, which is the Cancer ascendant and also Capricorn ascendant. So for Capricorn and Cancer ascendant, you can see that Saturn and Moon are the two planets which are controlling the first and the seventh houses. And you can see that Moon is the fastest moving planet and Saturn is the slowest moving planet. But obviously, if like a Cancer ascendant has to get married, you have to see that Moon and Saturn would interact in some way, before marriage in the transit. And that again, like, is can be a bit tricky because Moon is, like a very fast, quick moving planet. So it literally covers the sign in around 2.5 days. But that is the only way by which you can see that, like, if you have met somebody during that time when, let's say, Moon was in the sign of Capricorn for a Cancer ascendant, so the Lagna Lord is getting connected with the seventh house. Or in the transit, you find that, like, in whichever sign Saturn is transiting, every time Moon actually goes in that particular sign, so that period again becomes very prominent to show that you can meet the future spouse in that period. But I understand that for Cancer, coming in the first or the seventh houses, it can be a bit tricky and difficult to kind of predict, because the number of times this kind of a thing will happen is a lot. But still, you will see that anytime you marry somebody who, like somebody who is a Cancer or a Capricorn ascendant gets married, this combination will definitely happen. And along with this, you also have to see that what are the other influences of planets coming on this combination. Like you find that Moon and Saturn have come together in the transit, So first and seventh lords are together. But you have to look at where is Rahu placed, where is Ketu placed in the transit, where is Mars. Suppose you find that all of these planets are also somehow getting connected to this combination, then it is definitely showing not the best period. And that thing culminating into something is very difficult to happen. But if you find that, let's say, Jupiter is also maybe transiting the sign of Cancer or the sign of Capricorn for you during that time, so it is a big blessing. You can say that because Jupiter's blessing is coming either on the Lagna or the seventh house, or on this particular combination only, like wherever it is happening in transit. Let's say Moon and Saturn are transiting the sign of Taurus, and Jupiter is also transiting Taurus. So that is a very strong period to show something like that. So these other things, other planets also have to be seen. The house also has to be seen where this gochar is happening. Because let's say Moon and Saturn have come together for a Cancer ascendant, but it is happening in the sign of Sagittarius, let's say, So for a Cancer ascendant, Sagittarius is the sixth house. So the Lagna Lord and the seventh Lords, they both have gone to the sixth house. Or suppose they have gone to the sign of Gemini in the transit. So Saturn and Moon in Gemini for a Cancer ascendant, it has gone to the 12th house. So these transits only, like I would say, even though the two lords are coming together, it is not the best period to give something like marriage, not the best period to show that something will get culminated into something bigger. So this is also something which you have to notice. You have to see that, which are the benefit planets for your Lagna, and how are those benefit planets supporting this combination. Because for anything positive to happen after that, some positive influences have to be there, in the transit also. Suppose this transit is only happening and you have a planet like Ketu transiting your seventh house, or Ketu is, going over the seventh lord. So it will change things. It will alter things. It is no longer giving the same kind of results. So these things also have to be seen. Now let's talk about the last ascendants, which is Leo and Aquarius. So if you have the sign of Leo coming in the first house, or you have the sign of Leo coming in the seventh house, or you have Aquarius in the first house or Aquarius in the seventh house. So in both these cases, you three planets become very important, prominent: Sun, Rahu, and Saturn. So Rahu has to be seen in those cases where, like I have previously also mentioned, that Rahu is stronger in the chart compared to Saturn. Otherwise, you have to look at Saturn only. If suppose Saturn has gained more prominence in the chart, then you have to look at the combination of Sun and Saturn in the transit, in the gochar. So I'll give you another simplified example. Right now, Saturn is transiting the sign of Pisces. So when Sun will enter Pisces, which it is about to enter, so this combination will get formed in the transit, in the gochar. Okay. Now, this is not the end of the story. You know that, oh, for a Leo or an Aquarius ascendant, Sun and Saturn have come together in the gochar. So I have met this girl or I have met this boy and they are the one for me. It is not like this, because you also have to see the house where it is happening, you know. Like, for example, if we look at Leo ascendant, you know, this transit will happen, like, you know, in a few days from now, but it will happen in the eighth house, you know, because for Leo ascendant, the sign of Pisces falls in the eighth house where Saturn is currently transiting, and Sun is also kind of going in the eighth house. So if suppose you just imagine this combination in the transit, that the Lagna Lord, the seventh lords have gone to the eighth house. So it is not the best, it is showing it's not the best time periods, you know, to show something like marriage or something, you know, culminating into that. Or like if you meet somebody during this time, so it will, you know, go into something bigger. Because you can see right now for a Leo ascendant, Ketu is also transiting their Lagna. You know, Rahu is transiting the seventh house. So Ketu itself, like going over the Lagna, it can indicate like a very messed up, you know, state of mind of the person. Maybe the person is not in that zone only and they are a bit lost, you know, in their own daydreaming land or whatever. So these things also have to be seen, like what are the other obstructions that are coming onto the seventh house, onto this combination also, you know, where this is happening. Like, suppose if there was a case where this kind of a transit was happening in the seventh house or in the first house, you know, and suppose Jupiter was also aspecting this combination in transit, then that would have given something much more significant, you know, because Jupiter's blessing is going to come on this combination. So these things also have to be seen, like, you know, which other malefic planets are obstructing this meeting, you know, of the spouse, and like, are they supporting it or are they not supporting it? And the placement of Jupiter in the chart also has to be seen. So this is something which, you know, can kind of help you to time that meeting. But obviously, I have, you know, mentioned that's why more number of techniques in this video, because it is not just limited to only one thing. So like I had mentioned in the beginning of the video also, you have to look at the first and the seventh lords coming together in the gochar. But you also have to pay attention to the house, you know, where it is combining. And you also have to see the other planets obstruction, or like, are they supporting it or are they, you know, kind of giving more problems to this combination. Then you can also have a look at Jupiter, you know, going over your natal Mars, you know, for a female, and Jupiter going over natal Venus, you know. So that is, I think, a point which I missed, you know, that for a male, if you find that Jupiter's transit is happening over your natal Venus, okay, or it is happening in trines to your natal Venus, then during that time also you can meet, you know, a girl, you can meet your future spouse. So let's say that you have, as a man, you have your Venus placed in the sign of Taurus. And Jupiter, whenever it transits the sign of Taurus or Virgo or Capricorn or Scorpio, which is opposite, you know, to Taurus, then during that 1 year, you can meet, you know, your potential future spouse for a male. And similarly, you have to see that, you have to see Mars for a female. So this is another kind of like a technique which you can say. The third thing you have to, or you can look at Venus Mars transit, you know, over each other, trines to each other, the Venus Mars thing. And the fourth thing is the Tithi Pravesh chart, you know, which I have already made a video on. And In the Tithi Pravesh chart, if you find that the Lagna Lord and the seventh lords are coming together, then that year can also produce something significant with respect to meeting the spouse. So I hope that this video was helpful to all of you, and I have tried my level best to simplify it. But when I'm also like recording this and I'm hearing my own voice, I feel like it might be a bit confusing for some people, especially the concept of trines. So again, like if you have any doubts, you can ask them in the comments. But again, I'll try my best to explain the concept of trine. Like if you look at the sign of Taurus, okay, so Taurus suppose comes in the first house, like you are a Taurus Lagna. So you look at the fifth house, you look at the ninth house where you have Virgo and Capricorn, okay, and you look at the house opposite to it, which is Scorpio. So you have to mark these trine houses, the triangle, and you have to mark the house opposite to it. So in Bhrigu, this is something like these four houses become very important. These four signs become very important because anytime Jupiter or Saturn, transits over these particular signs, so you will see that, and if you have Venus, suppose placed there, so it will trigger something. It can trigger something marriage related for the male, and if you have Mars placed over there, it can trigger something for a female. So this is something which you can have a look at it. And like again, giving an example, suppose you are a male and you have Venus in Aries. Okay, so you will mark the sign Aries, you will mark Leo, you will mark Sagittarius, and you will mark Libra, which is opposite of Aries. So anytime Jupiter or Saturn transits these four signs, something significant can happen with respect to you meeting the person. Okay, so Saturn can also give something like that. Saturn is not, Saturn shows delay, it is maybe happening late, but it can also indicate that it can make you, meet the spouse. So I hope that this video was helpful to all of you, and thank you so much for watching, and see you all the next time.